Sure, if the government is trying to kidnap Mexican kids and give them to white Protestant parents, sure, I guess.
Or just, let's say, I don't want to bring up a story from later, we'll get to this, but the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, where do they get these kids?
Eastern Europe.
That's true, too. Well, in his specific case.
Yes.
But the ones we don't hear, where do the Clintons get the kids that they make hot dogs out of or whatever?
Oh, and Trump said one thing, which I don't want to say didn't help his case, because, again, nobody really cares. But Donald Trump said if these migrants don't like... Donald Trump, ironically, was just honest about it, in that he said, if these migrants don't like the conditions of our facilities, they're free to just go back home. And AOC said, correctly, is like, this indicates to me that indeed the cruelty is the point. It's to deter them from trying to cross the border illegally. And again, that's the point of prison, right? Is to deter you from committing crime so you don't go.
Yeah. It is a fair point that the anti-immigration or whatever, anti-illegal immigration or pro-immigration enforcement Republicans like Tucker Carlson would make. It is a fair point when they say, oh, you're just for open borders, in the sense that it does seem like the crux of the problem here is these laws have to be enforced somehow, and that's the nature of government laws. So if you're going to enforce them, how are you going to do it? Because if you don't do this, what are we going to have? It could be, a nice hotel room, and they would still say you're being detained, so it's still like a prison. So what are they going to get? Free houses? Well, then you're encouraging illegal immigration. So if your goal is to discourage and punish illegal immigration, the only way to do that is through things that are bad. So ultimately, if you don't want bad things to happen to illegal immigrants, the only way to do that is to no longer have federal laws that punish and discourage illegal immigration.
Yep.
So that's just a value-free statement. Maybe you're fine with that, maybe you're against it, but it does seem like the logic of the position is that, well, the government shouldn't be enforcing these laws, which of course is a funny take for someone like AOC. This goes back to, I want to make a point about anarcho-tyranny. Have you ever heard that phrase?
Yes.
Yeah, so a person who is not someone that we would endorse on the moral minority, of course, coined the phrase anarcho-tyranny to refer to a situation like you have in lots of places across the country where it seems like the laws against normal people are clamped down tighter and tighter. So as Tucker Carlson put it, because he keeps parroting this without realizing it, or maybe he does and he's just too afraid to use the term. If you light up a cigarette in an elevator, watch what happens to you. You go to dig a hole in your backyard and you didn't realize that it was classified as a wetland, and next thing you know, your whole life is ruined. But for people who are among the sort of lawless class, which I don't mean in any condemnation, I'm not saying that with any joke, I just mean people who are not a part of normal, suburban, whatever, bourgeois society, they can sort of commit crimes, not with impunity, but in a way that nothing ever really stops them from crimes. So to a normal person, they would see the same thing about immigration. And again, we have our disagreements about immigration. I have actually no problem with people flooding the border, legally or otherwise. But I could see why a normal, like a Trump voter, would say, I encounter all these rules every day that are fucking with my life, and then I see these people who they don't even go here, and they can come in and do whatever they want, it seems like. Just a off-topic point.
Yeah. Another thing
the continuing creation of a populist backlash that when it happens, the people who created it still
will be shocked.
Yeah. Why are they all upset?
Why did they persecute me so?
We took away their big soda, and then when they got rear-ended by an illegal immigrant, they weren't able to get insurance to pay for it because the person just vanished. And we wonder what they're upset about.
Another thing that AOC didn't discover, but it came out around the same time, was ProPublica broke a story about how a bunch of Border Patrol agents had a Facebook group that had nearly 10,000 people in it, and they were just sharing some, we'll call them extra spicy memes. Some of them were about AOC performing different varieties of sexual act on different varieties of people, but some of them were just joking about migrant deaths. It wasn't a good look. I'll just say this, I'm in no position to start throwing too many stones about what is said in private Facebook groups.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it's a bad look for Border Patrol agents to joke about dead Mexicans. I think we can both agree on that.
That's fair, but it's one of those things we can't really condemn.
Oh, and so this is one other thing. So on the matter of these camps, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez calling them concentration camps. As it turns out, this is not that is you and me, Dan. This is not our first time hearing about these camps.
True.
Have you heard of a man named Alex Jones?
I think I've heard of him. He's a water filtration salesman, right?
Yes. And you may have also heard of a man named Jesse Ventura. Yes?
I have heard of him. He was a governor of Michigan and a decorated Navy SEAL.
Yes.
Those are the things he's most famous for.
Yeah. Well, another thing that he did was mere 10 years ago, Jesse Ventura ran a show called Conspiracy Theory. And what the show was about was that Jesse Ventura would, pick a conspiracy theory and then investigate it, and then at the end, he would decide if it was true or not. Well, one of the episodes he did was called Police State. And his co-host for that episode was a man named Alex Jones. And the thing Alex was focused on was FEMA camps, talking about how FEMA was stockpiling bullets and coffins and body bags for the day when they would round up Americans and put them in what he referred to as concentration camps. And there was one particularly spooky scene where they went to one of these alleged camps that seemed to be empty, but it had like a children's playground there. And Jesse Ventura said, this looks like a prison, not a juvenile detention facility, but a prison that has, equipment for kids. And then a guard came out, was very, very upset with Jesse Ventura. What are you doing? Do you have permission to be here? No, go away. And then he saw Alex Jones, and he's like, yeah, definitely go. Like, the guy recognized Alex Jones and was like, you two definitely need to leave.
Because he had been there 3 other times that week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and so the guy said,
And he's like, oh, geez, he didn't know who he was. He was just like, this guy again. He's going to yell at us.
And so afterwards, the episode aired once. And then a lot of people in the government said it was, including, as we will link, the SPLC talked about how this episode promoted dangerous conspiracy theories that promoted extreme anti-government views, et cetera, and True TV never showed that episode again. Well, as it turns out, the facility that they went to had a name, and that was a T. Don Hutto Residential Center. And what that facility actually is a holding facility for migrants while their asylum claims are being processed. So that was actually the first time those of us with heterodox political views heard about these camps. So AOC, in actuality, inspected a FEMA camp. Not in the sense that it was literally FEMA. That's what it was.
I don't even know what to say about that.
You see why
things didn't exist at the time. None of these things existed until Donald Trump.
They went from being a wild right-wing conspiracy theory that only nut jobs like Alex Jones and Jesse Ventura believed in, but they were so fake and not true that if you aired it on TV, the government would tell you to stop showing it on TV. And then, a mere 10 years later, AOC is going to these facilities, calling them concentration camps. Oh, but then again, the government says, it's dangerous to call them concentration camps, et cetera, et cetera. But now it's a left-wing conspiracy theory. Isn't that fascinating? Doesn't that activate your almonds? Doesn't that make your noggin jog?
The only thing it makes me do is hanker for a glass of unfiltered tap water. And everything feels right with the world.
Oh, speaking, unfortunately, again, of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the right's most cringe-inducing, but yet simultaneously kind of funny jokes was this girl called Mini AOC, which was the same right that, rails against the left for politicizing their children to protest gun control or bringing their kids to protest, meat at Chick-fil-A, or bringing their kids to Pride. Well, this very same mainstream conservative movement found it very hilarious that a 4-year-old girl was impersonating Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her video blog. She would do things like AOC would make some video complaining about, housing inequality, and then Mini AOC would read off a script that her parents obviously wrote and about inequality in like cookies or snacks, right? Because, AOC is so dumb. Ha ha ha, sounds like a child, and that's the joke. They had the girl like take pretend picture at like a playground where it's like every time I go to this playground, it's closed, and she's like fake crying over it the same way AOC was fake crying over one of the migrant facilities. Well, apparently that was very not funny, and it was so unfunny that she got suspended from Twitter for hate speech, and her family was getting death threats, at least according to the family.
Well, yeah, say as Newsweek put it, they claim to get death threats.
Yes, they claim to get death threats.
Democrats
for the first time,
and liberals actually get them. Anyone who's not only claims to get them.
Yes. If you're on the left, you were threatened, and if you're on the right, you were allegedly threatened.
Yeah, as Tucker knows, when when the mob shows up at your house, chanting like "We're gonna kill you," that's still just you claim it happened. I mean, I never liked mini AOC. I think it's stupid, and I think it's more examples of the right doing exactly what the left did with Trump, which is they're going to meme this girl into the presidency because they think they're owning her into oblivion every time because they're so addled with derangement syndrome. It's such a classic case of just being inside the bubble where they don't realize that the things she says represents a huge chunk of the country, and that the more they think they owned her, they've only owned themselves in the same way that all the people who still make posts, I mean, these journalists who still make stories about how Trump did something, and then they make another story the next day about how our story about Trump got under his skin, and he's finished now, and we're working on our Riverdale reaction gif that's going to take down the Trump presidency. They're doing the exact same thing. It's funny how every time the political winds shift, it's always said every 4 years that one of the parties is done. Obama wins the presidency, and it was like, will Republicans ever be a significant political party again? The demographics are against them, etc. Who would have predicted Donald Trump comes out and changes it totally? And now the right is doing the same thing where they're saying, this left, they got these weak candidates, and they're constantly fighting the oppression Olympics amongst themselves and totally Trump deranged, and are they ever going to be able to win anything again? Meanwhile, AOC has become out of nowhere this like phenomenon, and it's actually demoralizing as someone who holds our position where we are waiting for all this to collapse, because I can actually start to see the next 20 years how it's going to keep going. And it's very sad because there are times when it feels like we're really on the brink of all this thing being done. And then you see this kind of stuff and you go, no, it hasn't even started yet. We're going to be dealing with this we're just going to be cynical old men explaining how, this is just, the more things change, the more they say the same. And the happening is never going to happen. And the wheels on the bus go round and round.
Yeah, speaking of a bus filled with... speaking of an overcrowded bus, I don't know. Democrats more. The first debates for the Democratic primaries were a few weeks ago. To this, before I even say anything, I would say for analysis of this on a podcast that, may or may not be better than ours, you can go listen to the podcast hosted by the very dastardly, evil, and hateful Tom Woods, who had 2 very good episodes with the dastardly Lou Rockwell and the vicious Tho Bishop for each night of the debate.
Yeah, those are great. The general takeaway from those, I didn't watch them. Did you watch them?
Yes. The debates were specifically arranged to maximize viewership, where you put there are 6 media designated frontrunners, and so 3 of them were in one debate, and then 3 of them were in another. And then the rest of them were like the rest of the also-rans were spread among those 2 debates. In debate number 1, it was Cory Booker, Beto O'Rourke, and Pocahontas, and then a bunch of other people. And then the second night was Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Mayor Pete. And then, and Bernie Sanders, who I almost dismissed. Well, after these debates, he became something of an also-ran too. Yeah. Tulsi was on the first night. And Tulsi claims her first kill by going after Tim Ryan, who nobody's ever heard of, because Tim Ryan was, for some reason, spouting neocon talking points about how the Taliban attacked us on 9/11 during a Democratic debate. And then Tulsi Gabbard just jumped in. It's like, you've activated my trap card. And then explained how it wasn't the Taliban, it was Al Qaeda, and we're helping Al